Okay, so I'm making my bagel and egg and cheese sandwiches that I like, and I'm boiling my water for my hot water bottles while I'm at it. And anyway, I'm going to tell you all a story, and it kind of connects to a lot of the stuff that's happening now with all these sightings of spacecraft and stuff, all the stuff, and all the disclosures that are coming out about um, captured spacecraft and live aliens and dead aliens and all that stuff. And hangars full of this stuff and reverse engineering and all that. My personal belief about all that is that they're not extraterrestrial, but they're in fact interdimensional, and that it's a demonic thing. That's my personal belief on it. I know there are people who disagree with me, and that's fine. Everybody's entitled to their own ideas. I'm entitled to mine, and of course you're entitled to yours, and I'll uphold you in that, even if you don't uphold me in being entitled to my own ideas, But I want to tell you a story now about something that happened to me in 1985, and I don't know if I've ever told this story before. I don't really think I have. I'm not on here anyway. I haven't told very many people this story because, of course, back in 1985, I told nobody. My eggs are cooking there. Because in 1985, you just didn't talk about things like that unless you wanted to be labeled a total fruitcake. But, yeah. Anyway, as I mentioned in some other videos before, when I was in high school, I was pretty much on my own. And I had a job working nights in a wire factory. I went to school in the daytime, and I worked at a place called Central Wire at night. A little factory in Perth. We made different kinds of wire, as you can tell by the name. We made the wire that is used in safety pins, spring wire that's used in safety pins. We made lashing wire, which is the wire that holds the bundles of electrical cables together as they go from one utility pole to another one. There's a rubber sheath goes over the bundle of wires, and then there's this wire that goes around that's called lashing wire. It's coated in wax as an anti-corrosive measure. Anyway, it's coated in, well, back then it was coated in polychlorinated biphenyls, PCBs, and wax. So we were all exposed to PCBs working in there, but at the time we had no idea what it was. I remember seeing black 45-gallon drums of stuff, and the letters PCB was stenciled on the drums. And I asked my foreman, Jack Radford, I said, what's in those drums? And he says, oh, that's used transformer oil from Ontario Hydro. He said it's part of the process when we rust treat the lashing wire. We had no idea. Anyway, we were up to our elbows in that stuff, and we had no idea about it. Anyway, I used to work from 4 to midnight. That was my shift. Jack Radford was a wonderful person, by the way. He was a great boss. He was my foreman. I went into that place, young guy, scared right out of my mind, I mean, this was a factory. I knew about all the risks of factory work, and I was just a young man. I was going in there doing a man's job, I was frightened. I was pretty frightened anyway. And Jack Radford was always very good to me, very patient with me, and very kind to me. I'm always very appreciative of that. He's gone now. He died of a heart attack a couple of years after he retired. When he was 67 years old, he passed away. Passed away at a hunting camp. Was found laying on the floor dead beside his bed in his room at hunting camp. He was deer hunting at the time. Anyway, that's Jack Radford anyway, really good guy. But what I used to do, because I'd been in school all day, and then I'd be at work all night pretty much until midnight, and didn't have a whole lot of time to myself. When I got home, I'd have to do my homework, you know, and I got back to the room where I was staying. And so, you know, I'd be up maybe till 2 in the morning doing my homework. And it was a hard life anyway. Those were some of the best years of my life, really, but they were tough years too, you know. And anyway, people like Jack Radford made them a lot easier, though. And like I say, I'm very appreciative of all the good people I've met over the years, all the people who have been good to me when they didn't have to be, you know. And really, there were a few times I really deserved to be fired from that job because I screwed up real bad. You get clowns in there would tell you to do something, and as a young guy, I wouldn't know any better, and I'd do what they told me to do. And sometimes I'd screwed up bad because I trusted people I shouldn't, and Jack would have to take me aside and say, hey, you know, don't listen to these guys. They come and they tell you to do something. Don't take them at their word, you know. Anyway, what I used to do is after I finished my shift at midnight, if the weather was nice, I used to go for a drive. And I used to drive from Perth. I used to drive out of Perth, the town of Perth, and I'd go up a road that was called the Rideau Ferry Road because it went through the village of Rideau Ferry. And I'd get on to highway number 15, highway number 15 south, which ran from Smiths Falls, the town of Smiths Falls, to Kingston, the city of Kingston. I get on Highway 15 south, and I'd follow that into Smiths Falls onto Lombard Street, and then I'd go up Lombard Street and I get onto Beckwith Street, which is the main street of Smiths Falls. I drive through Smiths Falls, and then I get on the Highway 43, which would take me back into Perth. And it would take me probably 45 minutes to make this drive. You know, and it was really nice. I had a 1967 Chev Bel Air car, $200 car at the time, but it was my car and I was real proud of it. Old four-door sedan, you know. Big old boat, had an AM push-button radio and a heater. That was it. Bent seat, steering, great big wide steering wheel on it and stuff, you know. And anyway, I just loved that car. And it was a nice car to drive, and I drive it into Smiths Falls and drive it home. Of course, gasoline was dirt cheap in those days, you know. Anyway, and it just had a little six-banger in it, you know, a little inline-six engine. So it wasn't bad on gas, even though it was a big, heavy car. It wasn't bad on gas. It wasn't a race car, but I didn't need it to be. I just needed it to get me from point A to point B, and I was happy, you know. It beat walking. It did. Anyway, I'd go for a ride up there, you know, the windows down on the nice, especially in the nice days in the spring, like in May and June and stuff. Anyway, it just kind of cleared my head, and it was a little time I had to myself, you know, a little peaceful, quiet time. And in those days, you wouldn't see another car. There was lots of times you just wouldn't see another car on the road. Anyway, one evening I decided to take my little drive, you know, and I'm heading out of Perth. And as you leave Perth, there's a Shell station on the corner. And the Shell station is on the corner of Gore Street East, which is Gore Street is the main street of the town of Perth, and a street called South Street. And if you go straight through that intersection where the Shell station is, a place called Donaldson's Shell, it's still there, although it's changed quite a bit. It's not really the same as it was back then. But if you go through there, through that intersection where Donaldson's Shell was, or is, if you go straight through there, that puts you on the Rideau Ferry Road, which takes you on the route that I would normally follow. If you turn right, that puts you on the highway number 10. That would take you into the village of Westport eventually. If you turn left, well, that's South Street. And if you turn left on the South Street, if you keep going, it'll eventually go into a field. Just an open field. If you keep going, the street will end and you'll be driving into like a cow pasture. Anyway, I'm coming through the intersection there by Donaldson's Shell, heading straight because I'm heading out of town, taking my drive, and I just glanced to the left, And I see these weird lights way down at the end of South Street. And I thought to myself, those lights look like they're over the field. And I was curious, so instead of turning left, instead of going straight through, I turned left. And I drive down to the end of South Street. Had to go for the intersection of South Street and Beckwith Street and Drummond Street, and then for the intersection of South Street and Beckwith Street, and then for the intersection of South Street and Sherbrooke Street. And after Sherbrooke Street, there was a little section of South Street, and then it opened up. It turned into like a dirt path, basically, that went into a field. So I drive all the way down through there, down into this dirt path, into the field in my old 1967 Chevy. This was back in 1985. It was the year 1985. It was the spring of 85. Anyway, I drive down in there, and to this day, I'm overwhelmed, really. There was a disc hovering over the field. It was up high. It wasn't hovering low or anything. I mean, you'd have to look up like that to see it. It was up fairly high. And it had all these lights, different colors, flashing, kind of going around it too. They were flashing, and it looked like they were moving around the perimeter of it. The colors kept changing. And anyway, there was that. And I guess I better eat my sandwiches, eh? Don't they look good? Anyway, I see that, and I see good stuff. Good stuff. I guess the timing of this could have been better, eh? Anyway, there's this disc up in the sky, and the lights going around it. There were red lights and blue lights and white lights, like yellowish white lights, green lights. And then there were also beams of light coming out from the thing, going down to the ground. Different colored beams of light, and they looked like they were marking or tracing something, almost like they were mapping the area out. And then there were these round balls of light that, again, were different colors. Some of them were red, and some were green, some were blue, some were like a whitish yellow. And they were coming down, and they seemed to be following these beams. And anyway, they were moving with the beams of light that were coming out of the thing. I'm sitting there looking at this thing. I shut the car down, and I'm sitting there looking at this, and I'm kind of mesmerized by it, you know. I didn't know what to make of it. But I watched it for, I don't know how long I watched it. I'm sure it seemed like longer than it really was. But one of these balls of light started to move toward my car. I saw it coming toward me, and I just kind of instinctively knew that I was being told, you better leave. So I started the car up anyway, and I backed up out of there. And I left. It would have been a great time for the car not to start for some reason, but the old Chev was pretty reliable anyway, and it seldom let me down. And thankfully that day it was true to itself, and it didn't let me down. But anyway, I got out of there. I went straight home, didn't say a word to anybody, went to bed. I was dead tired, you know, and I just went to bed and slept. Well, the next morning, everybody's talking about a sonic boom. They're saying there was a sonic boom in town, and it couldn't be accounted for. The Air Force was saying that nothing had broken the sound barrier that it knew of. There was no reason for the sonic boom. But a lot of people got woke up out of their sleep in the wee hours of the morning with the sonic boom. I didn't hear it. I was dead to the world when that happened. I didn't hear it, but I heard about it the next day. I didn't say a word to anybody. I kept that well under my hat anyway, that secret, you know. I was already kind of considered an oddball, and I thought this is just too much, I can't tell people this story. Anyway, a few years later, I stopped in to see the lady whose house I used to board at. This was back in the early 90s. I stopped in to see this lady. And she had some guests. When I stopped in, there was this couple there, be about her age, a couple that was older than me. And the man was retired, but he had been a perf cop. He had been on the Perth Police Department. He had known my grandpa because my grandpa used to sometimes have to go to the shoe factory at night when the burglar alarm would go off. And this cop knew my grandpa. My grandpa had a bad habit of leaving his keys in his car when he'd go in there. And oftentimes that cop would find my grandpa's car with the keys in it. And he'd pull the keys out anyway and he'd hand them to him, You'd tell him, don't leave your keys in the car like that. What if there was somebody in there breaking in? They could just jump into your car and drive away, and get away. Anyway, it ended up that we got talking about all that. And we got talking about weird things that you'll see. And he was saying that there was one time in that field at the end of South Street, he went down there, he saw a light in the field, and he went down there, and there was a full moon that night, and he said he saw that light in the field, and he got down there looking around, and it turns out it was an aluminum pie plate. And the moonlight was so bright that night it was reflecting off the aluminum pie plate that somebody had thrown in back there, and that's what it was. And then the light was reflecting off the trees, and that's what he was seeing, was the moonlight bouncing off this aluminum pie plate into the trees on the perimeter of the field. And so he said that was easily explainable what was happening that night. But then he said there was the night of the sonic boom in 1985, and he started to describe the exact thing I had seen. He'd seen it too. He'd been there at a different time, and he'd seen it too. Anyway, so at that point I opened up and I said, yeah, I saw that. I was there at one point too. But anyway, that's just one story anyway that happened. I saw a thing, Unsolved Mysteries by Robert Stack, the old Robert Stack show there, Unsolved Mysteries, around 1990, so about 5 years after I had had my encounter in the field there. He did a thing where he talked about that, and they actually did a reenactment of it, and they said people all over the world had seen this. And when they reenacted it, it was identical to what I saw in 1985. Anyway, that's just one story anyway of something weird that happened to me. I've had a lot of strange experiences like that over the years. A lot of paranormal stuff has happened to me or around me for some reason. I don't know why, but it has. Like I say, my opinion of it is that it's demonic activity. I could be wrong. I don't know that. That's just what I believe it is. Anyway, it's funny, another time, it was around that same era, and it was Halloween night, and I was up listening to the radio. Again, I was on one of my drives, I must have been. I think I was in the car. I'm pretty sure I was in the car. And the old AM radios in those cars, back in 85, we didn't have all the interference we have now, and AM radio worked really well. At night, we used to pick up stations from the States. And so I'm sure I must have been in the car anyway. But anyway, there was this call-in show down in the States. People were calling in talking about different paranormal things that had happened to them. And this teenage girl called in. She probably had been about my age. I was 17 or 18, somewhere in there at the time. She'd have been about that age, I'm sure. But she called in and she was asking, it had a guest on there who was kind of an expert on paranormal things. And she asked him, are Ouija boards accurate? And she was in tears. And he said, well, yes, pretty accurate. He said, they're not a good thing to fool around with, though. But, yeah, he said, any information you get, there'll at least be some truth in it. Although, you know, these are deceptive spirits that you attract and stuff. So he said it may not be exactly what they say, but yeah, for the most part, yes, they're accurate. Unfortunately, they are, you know, he said. And she said, well, me and my friends were fooling around with one of those things. And we asked it how we were going to die and when we were going to die. And it told me that I was going to die in a car accident on New Year's Eve, 1990. And anyway, the guy she was talking to, he said, well, my advice to you is stay out of cars on New Year's Eve, 1990. That's what he told her. So I often wonder about that, if that did come to pass, or if that girl's still around. She'd probably be in her 50s now, like I am, if she's still alive. But I wonder about that, you know. Did she die on New Year's Eve, 1990, in a car accident, or is she still with us? I'll never know, I'm sure, but something I wonder about anyway. Alright, that's it. I gotta eat my sandwiches. They're getting cold. So we'll talk to you later. It's quite windy out here. Bye for now.